All right, so we are going to look at day 4 of the Sean Grayson trial. Again, since it's not being streamed, we are relying on text-based coverage. It's awesome that ABC 20 is doing this coverage. Link is in the description for their Twitter if you're on there and want to follow directly. I also just dropped it in the chat. And then let's get into it. And again, by day 4, it's really day 2 of, like, opening statements were yesterday, and this is day 2 of the trial. That's typically how we count the days when we talk about trials. But they've been counting it since the trial calendar date, which is the day of voir dire, and they had a motions hearing on day 2. So they're doing day 4. We would typically call that day 2. We are covering the trial of Sean Grayson for the murder of Sonya Massey in July of 2024. Day 4, they're still on the state's case in chief. Sean Grayson chats with his defense team wearing a black suit and emerald green tie. Sonya Massey and Sean Grayson's families are seated in the gallery behind the media. There is a large... Oh, and I'll update my banner. There we go. So there is a large cardboard box with evidence tape around it on a cart in front of the state's table, and we talked about this morning. Judge Cadigan and the jury have entered the courtroom. The fourth witness is Illinois State Police Trooper Adam Markwell. Mary Beth Rogers, Assistant State Attorney, questions him. Markwell explains what crime scene processing is. Markwell is the one who processed and collected evidence from the department, from Deputy Dawson Farley and Sean Grayson. Those are the 2 officers that were present when shots were fired at Sonya Massey. Rogers approaches Markwell with photographs that he took of Grayson while collecting and processing evidence the day of the shooting. We are now viewing them on the screen. Sean Grayson is watching photos flash on the screen. Rogers has asked the witness to step down to look at evidence from the evidence cart. Markwell kneels on the floor and reads the contents of a bag that contains Grayson's uniform. Markwell stands and confirms Grayson's firearm on the evidence cart. He returns to the stand. We are now viewing photos of the crime scene on the monitor. Grayson is watching them intently. The pot Sonya Massey was holding rested on the kitchen floor. 2 bullet casings are shown in the photos. Rogers hands the physical casings to Markwell to identify. Malachi Hill Massey, Sonya's son, has entered the gallery. He's sitting with the rest of the Massey family. Markwell has stepped down towards the evidence cart. He put disposable gloves on. They're noting they use gloves. This is so detailed. And removed a medical bag from the cardboard box on the evidence cart. He confirmed it was the bag at the scene. Rogers hands the 3rd bullet casing found at the scene 2 days later, because remember they found the 2 at first, then heard the 3rd shot, that there were 3 shots in the body-worn camera audio. Then they go back and they get the 3rd, as well as fragments of a projectile found. Markwell was present at Sonya Massey's autopsy. Rogers has no further questions. Mark Wyckoff, Grayson's defense attorney, approaches to cross-examine. Wyckoff asks about what other pieces of evidence Markwell found at the scene. Markwell shares that he found an ammo box with 41 bullets in the box. We are taking a short break. Grayson chats with his defense attorney, Daniel Foltz. Summer Massey, Sonya's daughter, is sitting outside the courtroom hallway. Jury re-enters. The 5th witness called by the state is State Police Trooper, we're just going to say Trooper, Emily Maulding, who works as a crime scene investigator. Rogers is questioning her. Maulding assisted Trooper Markwell in collecting evidence at the crime scene. Trooper Markwell secured Massey's clothes and gave them to Maulding for processing. We now see a photo taken by Maulding of the robe Sonya Massey wore the night she died on the monitor. Maulding has stepped down from the stand to the evidence cart and identifies the pot she collected from the scene. She puts on gloves and holds it up for the jury to see. Defense does not want to cross-examine. Maulding has left the courtroom. The 6th witness is Haley Carls-Miller from the crime lab, from the ISP crime lab. Millhiser questions her and asks Judge Cadigan to declare her an expert of firearm and toolmark identification. The defense and Cadigan agree. Carls-Miller explained how she processed Grayson's weapon and bullets. She determined the 3 fire cartridges received from the scene were fired from Grayson's weapon. Carls-Miller walks to the evidence cart and shows Grayson's weapon to the jury. Carls-Miller returns to the stand to continue questioning with Millhiser. Wyckoff is now cross-examining. Wyckoff asks Carls-Miller, "You can't guarantee that they, and it's in parentheses, found bullet casings, the found bullet casings were fired from that same Grayson's firearm." Carls-Miller, quote, "It is my opinion they were based on my training and experience." So it's my opinion they were fired from Grayson's firearm based on my training and experience. So defense is disputing that the 3 rounds are from Grayson's firearm. Wyckoff began asking Carl Miller about Grayson's mindset while firing the gun. Millhiser objects to the question because Carl Miller is an expert on firearms, not mindset. Judge Cadigan asks Wyckoff to rework the question. Millhiser has no redirect. Carl Miller has left the stand. We are on a short break. Sean Grayson stands and chats with a member of his team. Then we are about to take a look at Massey's autopsy photos. Millhiser says the autopsy photos are graphic but necessary. Wyckoff says the autopsy photos are repetitive and can inflame the jury. So this sounds like arguments before the jury comes back in. Judge Cadigan has called both parties up to go through which photos they will show the jury. Sean Grayson watches the attorneys and Judge Cadigan as they deliberate the relevance of the photos. His hands are clasped in his lap and he's leaning forward. A sidebar took place between Judge Cadigan, Wyckoff, and Millhiser regarding a single photo. Judge Cadigan, I'm fine with letting the gallery know that with the next witness, there will be photos that will be hard to look at potentially, just so everyone's on the same page about what's to come. The 7th witness is Dr. Nathaniel Patterson, forensic pathologist with the Sangamon County Coroner's Office. Millhiser questions him. Dr. Patterson conducted the autopsy of Sonya Massey. The court recognizes him as an expert in the field. Millhiser approaches Dr. Patterson with photos from the autopsy. We are now viewing the autopsy photos on the monitor. Millhiser asks Dr. Patterson to explain each photo to the jury. Grayson looks at the table while photos of the gunshot wound on the left side of Massey's face are shown. A member of the Massey family leaves the room when a photo of Sonya Massey's brain is shown. Dr. Patterson explains a gunshot wound that entered under Massey's left eye and exited the left side of her neck. Her right leg had minor bruising. The brain had a little bit of hemorrhaging on the underside of the left side of the brain and a hairline fracture to the skull. The bullet did not go through her brain. The left internal carotid artery had been cut in half. A member of Grayson's family closes her eyes while the photos flash across the monitor. An x-ray of Sonya Massey's head reveals bullet fragments on the left side of her face. Dr. Patterson, quote, she died of a gunshot wound to the head. And she bled to death through that transected carotid artery. Dr. Patterson shares that the wound could have been survivable if medical treatment had been provided soon and bleeding had been controlled. Uh-oh. Because we heard from the officer, Farley, that was there, the only one that was present inside the house when Sonya Massey was shot, besides the shooting officer, Sean Grayson, the defendant, that Grayson ends up saying, it's not worth to render aid, don't bother. So now you have a medical examiner saying it could have been survivable if medical treatment had been provided soon. That's a rough set of facts for the defense. Dr. Patterson, if you lose your left carotid artery and you still have your right, there's a chance blood could still circulate if you tie off the left one. Although, would the individuals present in the room be able to do that successfully? I don't know, but they didn't try. And not trying could look against procedure. It could look against, a sense of humanity. I don't know. That's tough. That one's tough. Wyckoff is now cross-examining Dr. Patterson. Wyckoff says medical literature shows that some people live and some people die after having a cut internal carotid artery and receiving medical treatment. Dr. Patterson says, yes, it's very true. A short break has been called after Millhiser objects to a question Wyckoff asked Dr. Patterson. So prosecutor objects to something that the defense asks. Jury leaves the courtroom. There's a sidebar. Sean Grayson's leaning back watching the sidebar. In the sidebar, Wyckoff says Massey was positive for some substances that were found in her peripheral blood. Wyckoff wants Dr. Patterson to explain what he saw in his report. Wyckoff wanted to err on the side of caution when it comes to medical explanations. Millhiser has withdrawn his objection, so the jury has re-answered. Wyckoff has continued his cross. Wyckoff shares that Sonya Massey's peripheral blood sample was positive for delta-9 THC and positive for gabapentin. Dr. Patterson says delta-9 THC can cause distorted perception, and gabapentin is a central nervous system depressant. What's your gut reaction to hearing this, guys? Because my brain, my gut instinct would just go to, these aren't things that would make someone act erratically, especially like with physical movements. So there's something in her system, but it's not like something that's amping somebody up. If that was the case, this would be, I think, it would move the needle for the defense. So Millhiser redirects regarding the argument about survivability. Would you agree the sooner medical treatment is provided, the higher the chance of survival? Dr. Patterson says yes. And then the court's in recess. We will resume at 1 p.m. after lunch. They re-answer. All right, the 9th witness is retired Sergeant Anthony Regano. That's from the Elgin Police Department. He's been a crisis intervention instructor since 2006. Oh, they've had that's for better or for worse. I guess they've had this program going since 2006. I don't live in Illinois, but I know a lot of areas are trying to like initiate and launch programs that teach first responders, law enforcement how to deal with situations like this. Rogers is questioning him. Regano teaches the, quote, verbal de-escalation and tactical response portion of the crisis intervention 40-hour course. So the course is 40 hours. We now see on the monitor Regano's slideshow, which he uses to teach the verbal de-escalation and tactical response section of the 40-hour course. Wouldn't it be cool if in the YSL trial, after all the defense attorneys asked not even to present the gang expert training PowerPoint presentation to the jury, they just wanted to see it as disclosure, to see the background of these supposed gang experts that were going to get on the stand and instruct the jury on the meaning of slangs and the meaning of hand signs. And Glanville ruled that if you have it, turn it over, but never actually push the order. So Viverito never has to turn over the course that she took or the course that she instructed, either one of them. Never provides to the defense what this training that they all take entails. But here they get to not just see it as the parties, sharing among the parties, but they get to show it in court, which is a stark contrast. Very stark contrast to the YSL trial. Let's see. Regano, quote, pretty much every single aspect of policing is made better when paired with the conflict resolution model. From the slideshow, conflict resolution, recognizing, diffusing, and to be fair, if I was a defense attorney, I would question, well, do you get paid to teach these courses? So this type of conclusion could come from a place of, you get more business for yourself if you convince people that this training is the best training there is and everybody needs it. So, but from the slideshow, conflict resolution, recognizing, diffusing, and controlling aggressive behavior through the use of crisis intervention techniques, therapeutic communications, and in conjunction with an understanding of attitudes, emotions, and behaviors. Regano teaches maturity in crisis intervention. Mature officers can handle it when their authority is challenged. Mature officers bring confident energy to calls. Sean Grayson is listening to Regano's presentation to the jury. This gives wiggle room, though. So what do? You can't just automatically have a force of experienced officers. People have to learn. So there's wiggle room here. I think the defense can say, if it comes down to maturity, and somebody isn't mature, is that necessarily a direct violation of policy? Regano also teaches that when approaching a crisis, it is best to slow down and let time begin to diffuse the situation. An officer might have to be in an uncomfortable situation, but using time will ease anxieties for both parties. Regano, quote, officers created jeopardies. Officer-created jeopardies, I think, maybe, can be resolved by recognizing the barrier, respecting it, reducing it, and eventually removing it. To pass the 40-hour crisis intervention training, an officer must complete a role play. The officers must navigate 2 scenarios involving actors. One scenario is more clear-cut, the other is not. Rogers has no further questions. So Wyckoff begins to cross-examine. Wyckoff says that service providers are also trained in some form of crisis intervention. Regano taught Sean Grayson. Okay, so he was actually the instructor then. Taught Sean Grayson verbal de-escalation and tactical response. Regano and Wyckoff state that the crisis state has a broader definition than originally thought. Crisis state thinking emotionally rather than logically, where normal coping strategies are not helping to soothe. Rogers redirects. Regano reiterates that a crisis state can happen to anyone. It doesn't pertain to mental illness. We're taking a short break. The 10th witness is retired LaGrange, Georgia Chief of Police Lou Dekmar. He has almost 50 years of law enforcement experience, so he should have the maturity. Well seasoned. Rogers asked Judge Cadigan to declare Dekmar as an expert on police policy and procedure. Wyckoff has questions to ask Dekmar, too. Dekmar has his CV to reference. Wyckoff says Dekmar is testifying as an expert on the use of force and police training. Rogers says she asked to declare Dekmar as an expert on police policy and procedure. Wyckoff continues to question. And just randomly, but I'm curious, are there cases, even in the civil realm, where the roles are reversed here, where someone can maybe, is this person ever testifying? This is the state prosecuting, right? The state is calling the witnesses. But what about when someone has an allegation against the state and it's in the civil realm? Do we have these experts calling and testifying to use of force? So Wyckoff's questioning. Wyckoff reviews Dekmar's CV, emphasizing that Dekmar has not been in the witness box before a jury. He has mainly provided written opinions and statements or given depositions. Wyckoff says, "Is this the first time you're testifying as an expert in a criminal trial?" "Yes, sir." "Okay, I got ahead of myself." After further deliberation between Rogers and Wyckoff, Judge Cadigan has accepted Dekmar as an expert on police policy and procedure. So, throw away my question. This is the first time this guy is even maybe being called, but at least being allowed to testify. Being called by the state and being allowed to testify in a criminal trial. So, maybe we're going back to that question of maturity. He's green as far as expert witness testimony. So, let's see. He's accepted as a witness. Dekmar has reviewed the body-worn camera policy and CIT policy in Sangamon County. Is this the critical intervention? He explains why policies and training are essential for determining whether an officer acted appropriately in a situation. In reviewing Grayson's report and footage from both body cameras, Dekmar did determine that Sonya Massey was affected by mental illness. Dekmar: "It should have been clear to the deputies that they were dealing with someone going through a mental or emotional crisis." Dekmar says Grayson did not apply what he learned in CIT training when talking to Sonya Massey. Dekmar provides examples like Grayson continually asking for Massey's driver's license instead of asking Massey what she was doing while looking through papers. Grayson pressuring Massey to hang up with the dispatch was not in line with CIT. Dekmar shares that Grayson's voice was commanding instead of facilitating, and that he did not attempt to develop rapport. Dekmar: "It appeared to me that as he, Grayson, pointed the weapon at her, yelling or shouting, that she, Massey, kind of shrieked back, like you'd expect someone to do if they had a weapon pulled on them." Again, this is the moment of factual determination that the jury is going to have to make. Was it reasonable for Grayson to do what Grayson did? Was Massey acting reasonably or irrationally or in a threatening manner preceding the shots fired, the use of deadly force? Because it's always presumed if you're using a firearm, it's inherently deadly force. It's not like, well, I threw a rolled up magazine at somebody and it happened to hit them a little too hard, but I didn't expect that. It's always an expectation that a firearm, that's deadly force. And here you have a witness. You have the first witness, who was the other officer present in the room, saying he didn't think that Grayson was acting reasonably. And in fact, any fear he had was fear of his partner's actions, Grayson's actions, and not Massey's. And now you have this expert saying, well, it appears that Massey was acting reasonable in the reaction to a gun being drawn on them. So, and then they approach. They say a sidebar with Wyckoff and Rogers takes place. So I think defense objects to this, because you have a witness saying that, really getting at Grayson's actions not being reasonable. So let's see. Wyckoff says that in direct examination, we hear use of force when the state said they don't want to consider Dekmar an expert on use of force. Rogers says Dekmar is referring to the use of force policy. Judge Cadigan says the defense can cross-examine when referring to use of force policy. Then they take a short break. The jury has re-entered the courtroom. Let's see. Dekmar says Grayson collapsed the distance between him and Miss Massey. As a result of that, he placed himself in what he perceived to be jeopardy. When you decrease the distance, you can't take advantage of time. When reviewing the footage, Dekmar saw no threatening behavior from Massey before Grayson pointed a gun at her. Pointing a gun at an individual is considered a use of force, which Dekmar says isn't in line with the Sangamon County policy. So then Wyckoff begins cross-examination. Wyckoff confirms that Dekmar reviewed over 2,000 use of force incidents throughout his career. Dekmar and Wyckoff go over the 19-page report Dekmar wrote about Sean Grayson, noting that Grayson did not follow his crisis intervention training. Wyckoff says the report criticizes Grayson for telling Massey to hurry up and answer the door. Wyckoff notes that Grayson was not advised that he was going to be dealing with a 1096 or a person who is affected by mental illness. Dekmar says crisis intervention tactics should be used for all interactions with all types of people. So let's refresh this and see. I guess that took us about 11 minutes to get there. They've got 5 minutes to the hour, so let's get back to a refreshed thread. I think this is where oh, no, we still had a ways to go. This is still way. There's a lot of tweets here. All right, 18 minutes ago. All right, I think this is where we left off. Oh, is that the only update? All right, so from the one we just read about not being advised of dealing with the 10-6, the only next one is Wyckoff reiterates that Dekmar told the jury that Grayson violated Sangamon County's modern high-risk traffic stop policy. Wyckoff asks where in the body cam footage Grayson violated the policy. So he's asked him to point it out. Where'd you get your evaluation, your analysis from? So there we go. We'll give this a few minutes. We'll refresh it before we end up closing this out. Refresh over on Sean Grayson, and we'll wrap this up. I need a new place to redirect to because Broken Baker beat us again. So, let's see. All right, we have an update from 17 seconds ago. This is as close as we're going to get to real time. It says Wyckoff begins reading an excerpt from a memorandum. Rogers objects. A sidebar is happening with the attorneys. Grayson sits with his legs crossed, eyeing the jury and the media. The jury looks around the courtroom. So, yeah, into day 3, which will end up hopefully being live. We'll catch up in real time tomorrow, maybe. We'll see. So, and then we'll be caught up for Monday. Thanks, Louise. I'm going to follow you right over to Dolly. Guys, I'm going to set up the redirect. I'm going to play the ABCs of Steel on the way out because we heard a lot of vocabulary today. And that'll give me some time to set up